sir, whenever.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending. You can read it. I don't have to tell you that. It's distinguished testing. This is a passion that I had started to develop about a year or more ago. Simply put, I realized a whole bunch of things were happening, and I realized that we needed to do something different. Everybody else is focusing on better. I'm a little concerned with different. I'm not sure how much myself I can impact better. I cannot sit down tonight and write a better antivirus program. Not going to happen. First of all, I hate the code. Second of all, I probably would have to learn a heck of a lot about antivirus in order to do that. So there's a lot of controls that we have that are just failing. And I wanted to figure out a different way to approach an audit, a pen test, a red team, something that would actually return more value when it was complete. So that led to...
Do you have the HDMI button on for up there? Is it red? Because I have nothing up here.
Well, I'm on VGA.
Okay.
See, they told me VGA.
That may be a problem.
So I specifically got my VGA rig, which was like mothballs.
Do you have HDMI?
No, because I have the small HDMI, which you guys don't have support for.
Okay. Keep going, that's fine.
So this won't be broadcast. If you want the video, pull out a phone and start taking it. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
That's too funny. What? I'm sorry, what?
Oh, keep going, sorry.
Stop interrupting me. The water only gets you so much leeway. Sorry, you're doing it. That's so funny. Thank you. So anyway, so I started to think about this, and I started to come up with this whole framework, and that's what this talk is about. So one of the precepts starting on this whole journey is this. I almost went to walk out and start walking around. They told me not to move because I won't be on camera. One of the things that got me started was this phrase right here. 2012, that's pretty long ago in information security years. Yes, sir?
No, there are two types of companies, those who've been hacked and those who think they haven't.
You're stealing my thunder.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, it's okay. I have the same exact feeling, and that's in my notes that you can't see. It actually says those that are aware they have been hacked and those who are unaware they have been hacked. There really is. And he actually modified his statement somewhat more recently to say every major organization in the nation has been hacked, which I thought was a little aggressive, because some are new and they haven't been hacked yet. Give them a day or two. But seriously, this was one of the things that really got me along this road. We are not being able to put the controls in place successfully to stop things. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. So the next slide really details a lot of those reasons. I'm not going to read the slide. I'm just going to hit the points a little bit, and I'm not even going to hit every single one of them. But in delivering this talk, I decided I wanted to do a lot of research. So I went through each one of these points, and I contacted some professionals. I did some research. I read online. And the first thing I did was I contacted Brian Krebs, because one of the first articles I read, he published in 2012 a really scathing critique of antivirus. And his research said that about 25% of all zero-day malware was caught. So 75% of the new samples of malware that he was running through systems was just going right by. The signature-based antivirus of the time, which has now changed some, so we're improving, but at the time, it was horrendous. I would actually argue that 25%, while fairly pathetic, still gives you a layer of security. You're still reducing your risk. It may not be tremendously, but it's something. So with defense and depth, I'm not exactly going to throw away antivirus. I'm not going to herald it as the solution to everything. So I asked Brian Krebs, after reading his article, if he had anything more recent, 2012. So he said no. He pointed me out to again, I went to walk out. He pointed me out to a university researcher. I contacted him. He said, you can use whatever I say so long as you don't mention who I am. So I won't. But he pointed me to an interesting study from a company called Lastline. And they did a very cool study. If you go online, hit me up on LinkedIn, or I think I have my Twitter handle again, you can do that too. They published this really interesting study. It was a year long. They found new viruses as they were released, malware, every single day. They used VirusTotal and ran the brand new samples through. The next day, they ran the samples from the day before and the new stuff they caught. And they kept doing this throughout the year. So they were getting a tremendous amount of throughput on all of the antivirus engines that were out there. So their research said 50%, 51% of the zero-day viruses were getting caught. That's a really big gain from 25% in 2012. But it's still, now I'm still just calling it a layer. But here's the interesting thing. A year later, the day one viruses, because they only ran it for a year, 10% of the engines still didn't catch them. A year later. So they were no longer even anywhere near 0 days. They were in the wild for an entire year. So, and the other thing that they pointed out, because they wanted to be fair about this, they weren't poking too many vendors really hard. They were being, this is the whole industry, this is the state of the industry. But one of the things that they pointed out was every single antivirus engine at one point or another failed. So there was no silver bullet out there. There was no company that did really well. Some of them did better than others, but like I said, they were trying to be fair, so they didn't want to pump one up or knock one down, so they didn't do that. So the next point is really, I want to hit on this from two different perspectives. One is inventory, and the other one is just the state of our industry. So the first is, I like to do things interactively, and it's one ground rule. And has anybody here gone to a security MBA session, ISC Squared chapters? I recognize a few faces. I'm sorry to have to put you through me speaking again, but we do something there called Chatham House Rules. Chatham House Rules is very, very easy. You can say something that happened at an event, but you can't attribute it to a company. So you could say, I heard this company today had a problem with a virus. You cannot say which company. You have to be generic about it. So I'm going to ask a question, and some of you are going to be like, well, I don't want to raise my hand. Well, Chatham House Rules. So if you raise your hand, nobody's going to say anything. Everybody agree? You good? Okay.
Or you're asking generally, do we know about whatever you're about to ask?
No, I'm going to ask you a question now, but I have to preface it with that because otherwise everybody's going to look at me like I'm not. So who in here has an accurate inventory of their hardware and software?
Very small.
Oh, you're a very small company. Still, if I had a prize, I would throw it to you right now. One hand went up. Yeah?
I run an MSP and we've got a couple hundred clients. Like maybe 2 of our clients have an account.
There we go. So that's even a better sample size. And for the record, yes, sir?
How accurate are you?
That's a good question. That is actually a good question. And I've asked this question to a bunch of people. And most people agree that 80% or better is accurate. You're striving for 100.
Yes.
80% or better is accurate. So a couple more hands go up when you loosen the constraints a little bit. Okay, so now that's true, right? I mean, we're all fighting this struggle. And scroll down my notes. It's hard to do that, but there's a lot of them. Okay, so and of course patch cadence. The company comes out with a flaw, their patch comes out when? Sometimes it's right away, sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 3 weeks. The malware writers, they'll figure out the flaw right away. They'll have something out hours later. And that's actually happened where somebody releases a flaw. They don't even release details. And these groups that do this malware, they'll reverse engineer, figure out exactly what the flaw is, and release malware 8 hours later. There's no way a company's going to patch that fast. So we're really behind the times. We don't have an accurate inventory, so we can't patch even if we wanted to. And the patches aren't available. So we have to do something a little different. So encryption I'm only going to hit on very, very briefly. Because I think, I could ask the question too. How many people here feel that they do encryption at rest and in motion well? Raise your hand. 1, 2.
How big's the well?
3. Well, you have to have control of your certificates. Some sort of certificate management system. You have to be confident that your data at rest is actually encrypted. You have to be confident that your data in motion is actually encrypted. The stuff that you're worried about is never unencrypted. There's companies that do that. Actually, my own company that is pretty damn good at that. So, but interesting point, when my research on encryption, Gemalto in 2017 did this really broad survey of breach data. They found only 1% of the breaches involve encrypted data. That skewed somewhat because legally a lot of companies don't have to report encrypted data breaches. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is management things were great. This is kind of funny. I like this one. How many of you have a position where you talk to your CEO? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's a good amount. Probably like a quarter of you, maybe. Would you say your CEO is engaged?
No.
Yes. Engaged in information security, invested in what we do. Yes, I got a couple of nods, a couple of yeses. That's good. So 68% of CEOs think that their organization is a leader in information security. 95% of boards believe that their company is better than the field in information security. Conversely, 38% of CEOs say they are engaged, and 28% of boards say they're engaged. I don't know where the hell they're getting their information from. But that's an interesting stat, right? If you have a board that's engaged, if you have a CEO that's engaged, that's fantastic. Stay at your company. That's great. So I'm going to skip down again. The human element, I don't really want to go into. That's just people. That's social engineering. That's the nature of humankind to be nice to people. If somebody calls with a problem, you want to help them out. I mean, people want to fix that. I don't know that we should fix that, really. That's a whole other talk. But lack of qualified information security professionals, really one point here. IC Squared had a 2018 study. They found that 2.9 million security positions were open in the world right now and not able to be filled. So if anybody here is looking for a job, I don't know what you're doing wrong, but see me afterwards, because I might want to hire you. So is there any pen testers here? Any red teamers? Now I know why you said it. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anybody else? So, same thing, Chatham House rules. You don't have to name your company or anything. Has there ever been a time when you were on an engagement and you didn't get in?
No.
No? So? No. So 100% success rate. That's pretty much the industry standard, by the way. It's phenomenal. So that's what the headline is: red team wins. So if you engage one of these firms and they get in, one of the things that you get is a nice little report. A lot of companies take these reports and do what they're supposed to do. They'll take the control that failed, or they'll take an area that didn't have a control. They'll apply control. Maybe it's just a patch. Maybe it's a new policy procedure. Maybe it's a complete upgrade, overhaul, new security appliance, whatever it's going to be. A lot of companies totally ignore them. I'm sure these guys can test there too. And then the next year, when you're engaged, you get in the same exact plan, which is always fun. And you're done on your 2-week engagement. Fantastic. But one of the things I found in this whole trying to flesh out this thought that I had was I went to the P-test standards, which is the pen testers' reporting standards, the engagement standards. It's really their Bible of how to do this stuff. Very well written. It's missing something very, very big, though. When you get to the end of an engagement, it doesn't tell you how you failed to catch them. It tells you what they did, how they got in, what flaw they breached, what protocol they took advantage of. But it doesn't say, you would have caught us if. And that was one of the big things that I was trying to figure out when I was going through this whole process of coming up with this thing. So it's really interesting. There's stories of pen testing. These guys could probably tell stories that are much better than mine. But fantastic stories about just all sorts of creativity on how the heck people get in and do what they do. Anybody familiar with, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on this, real name. Great Bait?
Bill Brothers? Yeah.
Yes, Bill Brothers. Friend of mine, really great guy, and I just blanked his name, so, and it's recorded, so he's never going to forget. So he once told me a story where he did a physical pen test, and he walked into a building with a clipboard, and he piggybacked somebody, and he walked in. He found an empty office, and he sat in the office, and he set up his computer, and he worked all day. He met people. He left. He came back the next day, did the same exact thing. By the end of the week, people were thinking he was new at the company, and that he was like a VP in the office. How funny is that? There's another story that I wrote. Rob Hamlet, he's Spider Labs. He told a couple stories. They're online too, so you can find them. You know, you credit where credit's due. He had 2 different pen tests. One of them was really funny, though. I'll just share that one. They could not find a way in. This company had locked down everything. They found no flaws. They found nothing. Social engineering didn't work. They couldn't get in. They finally found an unprotected network that was barricaded off from everything else. They got the video cameras. They couldn't do anything with them, but they got the video cameras. And then they realized that one of them was actually in a work area, and it was a pan-tilt zoom. And they tilted zoom into a keyboard, and they caught username and password and breached the whole network. They got in. They had credentials. It was fantastic. So it's just interesting. And the red team wins. The next thing that really influenced my going into this whole thing, and I'm not going to go into these, you can read these, but is exactly this, the dwell time. It boggles my mind. I understand our adversaries are trying not to be discovered. But it's just mind-blowing that they can stay in our networks for hundreds of days and we don't see them. They don't trip any alarms. And the thing that bothered me about this, and the thing that furthered my thinking along the assumed breach testing, is we must not be collecting the data properly. We're not alerting on the right things. See, and this is kind of funny. I'm going to walk a little bit. Hopefully I won't go out of frame. Say we have black box problems. Few people, they think about a rack or a single box that you don't know anything about. That's not what I mean. I actually mean this thing, which, by the way, are not black. I don't know why they're called black boxes, but the orange flight recorder, that's an airplane flight recorder, and seriously, they're not black. That was really shocking to me when I started doing this research. They track everything. A plane goes down, you pull that sucker. First of all, you can locate it you can locate the plane by that thing. Well, a plane goes down, it has all the data you need, all the forensics you need to figure out why that plane went down. Was it mechanical error? Was it a pilot's error? They've got everything on there. They know every move that was made. They know what time it was made. It's fantastic. And that was something that just struck me. We need to do something like that in information security. So, I like that. We can't give up. That's not really what we do. First of all, we like the challenge. I like the challenge. I mean, they're stacked against us, those odds, right? But we can still beat them. We can still come together and find better ways to do things. So, this is something that I took an inordinate amount of time on. Probably way too long. That little paragraph right there. Because I'm trying to hope that when you walk out of here today, you will think to yourself, this is actually a good idea. And I think I would like to push this forward. And you can help, because right now, roll the clock back 20 years, somebody came up with the idea of pen testing. And everybody thought, wow, this is crazy. Attack our own network? Now it's in compliance standards all over the world, and everybody does pen testing, and there's pen testers in this room right now who do it for a living. Who would have thought? So my goal is, a few years from now, assumed breach testing will become part of our environments. Maybe it'll be a supplement to the red teaming. Maybe it'll be either or. I don't really know. I think the value propositions are different. But this is essentially what it is. So going into it a little bit more, giving you a little bit more detail. Pre-engagement. This is a lot like prepping for a pen test, prepping for a red team. The first step and this is a step that's in a lot of compliance guidelines. It's a step that we all should already have done. We have to know what is important to our companies. We also should not be the ones to make that call. We very often sit in our rooms with no communication from management. I've been there, and we try to figure out on our own what's the most important thing. And sometimes members of the team will actually kind of laugh when somebody brings up the idea of, hey, we should go talk to management. We should go talk to upper management and find out what they think is the most important. Imagine IT scheduling a meeting with the CFO, the CEO, a couple of vice presidents, and just sitting down and saying, I want to go over everything we hold, and I want you to tell me what the 3 most valuable things are. They would be like, I've got more important things to do. But this is exceedingly important. We have to let them know how important this is. We have to let them know that this is going to drive our budgets. This is going to drive our initiatives. This is going to drive what we protect and how much emphasis we place on that protection. And we really shouldn't make the decision. I go over that because, well, not only is it obvious, but very recently I had a really cool discovery in my own company. I spoke to our CTO, and there was a couple of other executives in the room, and we were talking about this very thing. Root Insurance does a really cool thing, and I'm not plugging just the dynamics of the company. We actually do a whole bunch of stuff with telematics. So we have a whole bunch of data, and that data drives a decision about whether we want to insure somebody or not. It's not driven by weird models like, are you married, are you over 25? It's actually models that are based on your driving. What we do, that data science, the brilliant minds who are much smarter than me, who figured out all of these data points and how they interact with each other and what is a safe driver, I assumed was our biggest priority to protect. Executive management totally blew me out of the water, and I was so grateful to hear they totally disagreed. They thought our #1 responsibility was to keep our clients' data secure. Because we don't own it, we're just custodians of it. And I was so blown away to hear that, because that is what I would have prioritized, but I just assumed the business would have prioritized differently. So the lesson there is really don't try to do this on your own. Don't try to be the one who determines the priority. I was dead wrong. I'm glad to hear I was dead wrong, but I was dead wrong. If I would have built my program around my assumptions, my #1 goal would not have been the business's #1 goal. It's not a good way to get things done. This is a weird one, and IT is not used to this. Information security is not used to this. But if you have a legal team, if your company is big enough to have one, or if you have an outside counsel, try to talk to the CFO about getting an hour of the outside counsel's time, or try to make a meeting with somebody on the legal team, and get to know them, and become their friends. Because you're going to need their help. This is very, very important. And what I put up there instead of the work product doctrine, that's a legal thing, which means most of our eyes will glaze over. But it's very, very important. If you have an incident, what do? Legitimately, something just went really, really wrong, and you need some serious expertise to come in. You hire somebody. If the legal team does not make that hire, everything they do is discoverable in court of law. So I usually give this talk with Matt Curtin. Does anybody know who Matt is? One person. So he's a much better speaker than I am, so I apologize ahead of time. But he has these great stories about, and he, puts the personal identifiable information outside of it, generic stories about a couple of companies that he's been engaged with where they did it right, and everything went according to plan, and where they did it wrong, and it went very wrong. So it is really important. I really can't stress this enough. Get to know your legal team, get them on board, let them know if an incident happens, you're going to call this number and engage this firm. If you get really chummy with the legal team, that's fantastic, because then you can tell them you're going to call and engage them and then flip it to me. You don't have to be involved really, but you have to be the lead. So everybody understand that? That's one of the most key things I think you probably want to leave here with. Now, this is obvious, and it's an extension of the previous one. Incident response. Incident response is much more complex than this little teeny 4 points here, so I'm sorry about that. But these 4 points are, if you're in a company right now and you don't have a full-fledged incident response plan, get this done, and then you can do an assume breach test. And the reason why I say that is because part of an assume breach test is actually working on this. So if you have a framework, even a poorly developed framework, it's going to help you tremendously when you get to the end of this testing. And there's a very important reason why you want to do this, and I will go over that in a moment or two. So now you've got your data, you've got business relationships, you've got legal relationships, you have gone through and done your incident response plan, you're ready to engage a forensics firm. Don't take this lightly. You really have to engage a firm that knows what they're doing. Try to get a firm that has a history of presenting in court. Try to get a firm that has expert witnesses who are really qualified expert witnesses. And just make sure, really just do your homework. Make sure that you're actually getting a firm that knows what they're doing. If you are a cloud-first company, don't get a forensics firm that's been around for 20 years and doesn't know what the cloud is quite yet. Try to get one that has a few people on their team who specialize in pulling whatever they can from AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whatever flavor you're in. The reverse is true as well. If you're on-prem, get a firm that has done data center work on-prem, and that's their bread and butter. Now, the reason why, for this slide and the previous slide, the reason why you want to do this and the reason why this is so important, this has a side effect, potentially, if you do an assume breach test. I'm sure you can all figure out what that is. You may find a breach. So that's not really the goal here, but it is a possible side effect. You're going to identify the goods that you're looking to protect. Then you're going to hire a team, and they're going to go and look at it. This is an outline. I swear, I'm just going to tell you all right now, it is really hard for me to stay still. I want to walk around and just... Okay, so what is done? As you might expect, you are assuming you have a breach. You're calling in the cavalry, only there's no red lights flashing. You're going to have a forensics team come in, and they're going to say, how big's your company? How many branches? How many locations? Okay, what's your data? Where is your data? Okay, what is your primary objective to protect? Let's go look at that. Now, if there was a breach, what can we find out? Maybe it's on a server, and they'll look at netlogon.log, and they'll look at whole bunches of different permissions and artifacts and whatever they can. Maybe you're streaming to a SIEM, and they'll look at that data based on what you told them is the important thing. They're going to actually conduct the exercise as if you really had a breach. And that's really, really important, because the last thing you want to do is do this if you've had a breach and have no idea what's going to turn up. So I could just talk forever, so I can keep checking the time. So this is kind of a joking slide, the last one, but it is actually a possibility, and I just do want to point it out. So key, detect, alert, and respond. That's what they want to find out. And they want to find out before a breach occurs. They want to make sure that you can actually find the things that they look for, which are not the things that we are looking for, as the red teamers here can attest to. We're obviously not looking at the right things. So we need to get somebody who knows, somebody who comes in after and cleans these messes up. Get them to look at this stuff beforehand. Work with you. Your ability to detect, your ability to alert, and then go over your incident response plan. And yes, there is a possibility as you do this, they are going to uncover evidence of a real breach. This is why you want to be friends with your lawyers beforehand. This is why this whole assumed breach testing should be engaged from the legal team. And this is why you want really qualified forensics firm. Because if they find a breach, and last time I did this talk, I had, and I'm not trying to offend any red teamers here, I had a red teamer stand up kind of aggressively. He said, red teams do this too now. Why don't you just say, engage a red teaming firm? That's a very good question. However, there's a slight difference in how the data is handled to preserve evidence. And it's very key if you stumble across a real breach. You don't want a red team who doesn't know forensics inside and out to discover that breach. Because they may have already run tools, they may have already made mistakes in handling the data. You want a forensics firm that's going to go in there with the mindset, this is a breach, we're looking for evidence. Very big difference. And I'm not insulting red teamers, they're fantastic. They would find so many different things, and the value of that is incredible. This is just a different approach. We're trying to stop the breach from ever happening by doing this work ahead of time, preparing ourselves to detect, alert, and respond. So the deliverable, I see this somewhat as the P-test standards. You're going to get a formal document. You're going to work with this team. This team is going to come back and they're going to present the findings. They're going to present their gaps. They're going to find out, they're going to say, hey, we went in, we found some good evidence surrounding this one box, and then we went to check the seam and we found out that you're not logging this box. And there's finding number one, get your crown jewels to be locking to the seam. That might be a simple finding. It could be anything. It could be the triggers that you have aren't really relevant. They're good, they'll catch some things, but red teamers are going to blow right by them. And they know how they're going to trip alarms. Because they are the ones who clean up after the fact. They are the ones who find the little teeny hidden artifacts that red teamers can leave behind because they know nobody's going to find them. So if we work with a firm that knows this stuff, we can know what triggers to look for. We can alert on those triggers. And of course, they're going to go over an incident response plan, which is why I mentioned in the beginning, have one, make sure it's somewhat fleshed out, make sure, especially the communication part, this is one that almost everybody leaves out, the pet peeve of mine. I could do a whole session on incident response. But one of the things that often gets left out is communication. There's one thing that I always say is, and I think I actually put it on there. Did I put it on there? No, it might be coming up. No, I think I did. I had it. Oh, I was on an early one. That's right. It's just something that I found a long time ago to be very wise advice. It is always better to call the FBI than to have the FBI call you. You don't want them knocking on the door saying, you have a breach, and you having no idea. That is like a career-ending thing, resume updating event. So if you could do this homework, if you could make sure that we're actually seeing the right things we're supposed to see, we're actually alerting on them properly, and we've actually done our homework on incident response, I think we will be much better off to stop the attacks that are actually getting through. So this doesn't have a bearing on the controls that we've put in place so far. This doesn't affect antivirus, it doesn't affect your IDS, your firewalls. This is simply a practice that I believe will be better suited to let us find the things that are obviously getting through. The red teamers here have all attested to that. We all know it. So this is pretty much it. This is cool. I saw this from a site that I really should have referenced because, you know, you're not supposed to do that, so I'm sorry. Whatever site that is, thank you. So, and really, I'm hoping that this actually gains some traction and becomes something that people in the industry really consider as a really viable option to help them elevate the maturity of their information security programs. And this would have been a much better talk if I was able to walk around. So I apologize for that. But, and that's pretty much the end. I mean, I will take any questions anybody has, but there's my contact information.